Hey, welcome to an episode of Off the Fence. So glad that you're taking time to either listen or watch. If you don't know, you could do one or the other or both. You can go to YouTube and watch it and all that, or you can just listen to it, Spotify, Apple. But thanks for tuning in, Off the Fence. My name, if we've never met, is David. And this is my wonderful bride,
Katy.
Katy.
I thought you were going to finish the sentence.
I was hoping you knew your name.
I do know my name. I have so many names.
But I call you only nice ones.
You do. Thank you very much. So
you're hot.
I
know
so
you
we're
hate it
gonna
when I say that.
we're gonna talk today. It's just you and me.
Should I just start going through the names I call you?
Please, no, and thank you. So a little bit ago, you were talking with the staff, and we even talked about it as a family while we were away on vacation, just about this concept of generations. And there's so much to unpack with it. And I thought it would be interesting. I thought it would be something that people would want to hear and learn more about. Maybe people don't know, or maybe they don't fully grasp just this whole concept. I'm going to read a Bible verse, though. Psalm 78:4. We will not hide them from their children, telling to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he has done. And over again in Scripture, there's talk of learning from the other generations, the good and the bad, but passing things down. And so you've done some study on the generations, and there are 7 of them right now, which I didn't know.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it really is, because there's a lot of people in the world, but that's a lot of perspectives. And
some would even argue you can subgroup some of those generations, that they're far more different than similar, so there should be more than 7, some say, but there's 7 general ones.
So what is, like, when we say there are 7 generations, what does that mean? Is there a specific time frame with each generation? And then I would love for you to walk through them if you want.
Yeah, so most of us, I think nowadays it's become a bit more popular to even think about and know your own generation, what you know, your characteristics. Okay, so I love to listen to 90s music when I'm in your vehicle because you have satellite radio and I can tune into that.
You turn it from my country station to 90s.
Yeah, to 90s, because 90s is really when music got good. Like classical music, that was never high quality. Kind of awkwardly, we got through some stuff. The Beatles helped a little bit, but once we got to the 90s and we landed at like vocalists that are so powerful and significant, like Britney Spears, and I'm just telling, no, I'm just, so I grew up, so we're all pretty nostalgic about our own decades or our own generations.
Yeah. And we love to learn about ourselves and talk about ourselves. And so, yeah.
But if you want to, what you should do is peel that back a little bit more, because we all will have a tendency to favor the best part of our generation and lament or complain about the worst part of other generations. And the problem is like what you read in Scripture, is that we're actually supposed to be a part of each other's generations, help each other. Parenting, if you refuse this, you're going to suck as a parent. If you're a boss or even just you're on staff or an employee of a place and you refuse to embrace other generations that you work with, you're going to suck at that. Yeah. And so a teacher, come on, you're investing in the next generation. When I say next generation, that they don't have value until later, but they are the next generation of CEOs and teachers, mayors, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's important just to talk about the different generations. So I got notes that I shared earlier. If people don't know what generations are, so as you're listening and watching, I'm gonna isolate some of your generations and see. Some of you will disagree with this. Or agree. I'll go to 1901 to 1927. In fact, I'll even see if we can put these in the show notes.
I would love that. For those I like notes.
Yeah. So 1901 to 1927, known as the Greatest Generation. That's a pretty popular group. People have talked about them. We all seemingly like that group. They survived the Great Depression, fought World War I. They grew victory gardens, is what they're called. You might even know more about that than I do. But basically, they needed to feed their families. And so rather than say, hey, we need handouts from someone, or what do? We don't know what to do. They started growing gardens for the purpose of, not that they want to be clean eaters or what it's like, hey, this is the only way for us to get food. Let's start our own gardens. They contributed to one of the most economically prosperous times in U.S. history. So this is why that group gets called the greatest generation, is because some would say they faced incredible adversity and created and did a lot of great things. They didn't just survive that season. They did some awesome things that still affect us today.
So just to clarify, so born between 1901 and 1927.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's good. I just think for people that maybe this is new information, born between that chunk of time, that section of time. I think too, one of the things about the greatest generation that I think we all admire, even if we don't recognize it specifically, is there was a lot of adversity and there was a lot of rallying and working together and supporting one another, but that they were rallied and together. And I think that is one of the things that has made us continue to talk about them and learn from them.
Yeah. So
good. Greatest generation.
Something important to know is so this is one of the existing generations right now. So then it goes, if you're born 1928 through 1945, and I guess I probably should offer a disclaimer that yes, these are dates, and yes, some of us will look at the generation stereotypes and say, that doesn't really fit me. Right. Sure. Well, at some point in history, we got to lock down a date. There's got to be a line that, yes, you might actually be in both of them. But 1928 to 1945, known as the silent generation. Okay. Let me give you some basic stuff. Known as traditionalists, raise kids to be seen, not heard. Practical thinkers, opposed to war, actually. So, which makes sense. You were really exposed to the effects of a world war, so you are greatly opposed to it. So, especially the Korean War, Vietnam War, they were highly opposed to that. Better educated, though, than the greatest generation, pursued secure jobs, but also valued living the quiet life, to where if you lived in a neighborhood, one of literally the core values of everyone in the homes was typically don't make too much noise, don't make chaos in our neighborhood. Let's live a quiet life. You might feel it, think it, experience it, but don't blow up about it. And that was actual value, was I'm going to restrain what I'm actually feeling.
Yeah. What's interesting to me too, though, is that so much of that is in almost direct response to what happened with and through the previous generation. Yeah. They're connected and they respond and then shift.
Yeah, what you'll see is each generation, whether you want to or not, you learn this in parenting, you would love all your good characteristics to rub off on your kids, but they see all the good, bad, and ugly. And that's how generations work is... however you adapted and adopted and functioned, it's going to get passed on in some way and be responded to.
Sure. Yeah.
So 1946 to 1964, if you were born there, you are a part of what's called the baby boomers. And I will say, I was raised by baby boomers, and they get kind of a hard rap now. They do. Yeah. They do. But let me give you the stereotypes, not necessarily stereotypes, but some experiences. Named from the baby boom following World War II, known as an optimistic group of people shaped by the Cold War, Vietnam, civil rights. It's where we get terms hippies and yuppies and classifications.
So a lot of stuff happening in those decades.
Oh, yeah. Highest divorce rate in U.S. history of all generations. The baby boomers so far have been tagged as they got the highest rate of divorce. Now, if you do your history and you study there, it's when some laws were changed that made divorce easier, legally, where you could actually obtain that much easier. And people they ran with it. And so divorce skyrocketed. Okay. Typically a highly driven group of people popularized the live to work lifestyle.
Sure.
So some of the negative characteristics that get thrown on boomers is it's a generation full of workaholics. Yeah. Where a lot of times it's when a lot of people moved into not just both parents working, but working too much, working all the time. And so I know that's a negative characteristic. I'm not trying to isolate that with any of the generations, but I think I'm highlighting that to tell you about the next group.
Okay.
So the next group is 1965 to 1980, known as Gen X or Generation X, referred to as the forgotten generation. Obviously had the highest rate of divorced parents, is what I'm trying to highlight. So of any generation. So that affects you. That change, whether the parents want to admit, no, my divorce doesn't affect my kids. They're totally cool with it. They like it better. Untrue. That's just, you might think that optimistically and your kid be telling you that.
Yeah.
But statistically, what we've learned is it's affected them. And so here, they became very focused on work-life balance because they saw workaholic parents that often tore the marriage apart. Or that left the kid by themselves all the time.
That's where the term latchkey kid came into play during that.
So
with that generation, with Generation X.
A value of Gen X people has been like, I don't like what I saw and how it affected me. So Gen X people have really worked at a work-life balance. In other words, Gen Xers were the ones saying, my work and my other part of life don't have to mesh together.
Sure.
Interesting, very entrepreneurial. Introduced informality at the office, like, hey, let's wear t-shirts. We don't have to wear suits. Come on. Ushered in hip hop and grunge, which come on, right now. We all have to admit that the introduction, specifically of hip hop, is the single-handed most. It's the greatest invention of all time.
I can't say that personally, but I'm very happy for you.
Well, and one day you will see it.
I do not think so, but because this was the season where, we can talk like Billy Ray Cyrus and Travis Tritt and mullets and stuff, but
right, but
informality at the office,
and those were fun, like carnival kind of things to watch. But hip hop has changed our lives and made it better. This group, Gen X, had a disdain for authority and the establishment. And a part of this was affected by what they saw growing up.
Sure.
They saw the establishment. To give you a little bit, the greatest generation and baby boomers were strong advocates of the institution. Be a part of the institution. Create an institution, join an institution. In church world, create a denomination. Be a part of the denomination. Be loyal to the denomination because we trust the denomination. Or if you're a part of a big like national group, it felt good and big, important to be part of it. Where Gen X was like,
maybe not.
I don't know if I trust the institution.
What's interesting to me is Generation X were the latchkey kids. And they became the helicopter parents. Isn't that interesting? Again, where we respond, and I think before you go on to the last couple ones, I do think some of the things that I've learned through this study is to have grace for the generations that came before me, to try to understand why maybe they did what they did and functioned how they functioned, and then work really hard at helping to make myself and those around me pass on the very best that I can to the next, to be conscious and aware and do my best to pass on. Because Generation X, I tether between a few different ones, but I do think latchkey kids to helicopter parents trying to make it better, but maybe just created a different problem.
Yep, and that's what
we all do.
Yep,
yeah.
That's what we tend to do.
Yeah.
So
what's next?
We go from Gen X to Millennials, 1981 to 1995 is when they were born. Millennials also, I think, get a hard. Like boomers and millennials seem to right now. Different groups have strong opinions about them.
Yeah.
The millennials lived through two major recessions. I would even now add a third. Mass shootings were normal. 9/11, the two longest wars in U.S. history. Those are what millennials would say that was normal. That was me. I was born during that time and growing up. Social media, normal. Raised with a felt pressure to succeed in life, to win at life, because the other generations had seemed to have done so well, accomplished so much, so many inventions, innovations from the greatest generation all the way through Gen X.
Yeah.
So the millennials are like, what do we need to invent? What do we need to do? How hard do we need to work? How much money do we need to make? Like, what houses do we need to live in? And all that's now led to a generation, instead of saying, what will we do? They feel the pressure to do it.
Sure.
Which then led to millennials experiencing and going after mental health unlike previous generations because they were feeling a pressure and they're going, what is going on? So mental health began to get a bit more traction going. Is not only my body important, but my mind. Unemployment and student debt widespread among this generation because of the pressure. Apprehensive is a word used to describe millennials, meaning apprehensive about what if I screw up? See, I grew up, there was no social media. So if I had a loud conversation, if I had a fight with a kid in my neighborhood, it was not on video.
Yeah.
Did
you have fights with kids in your neighborhood?
We beat the crap out of each other.
David.
Yeah. And then we were best friends. So what I did in school was not on video.
Sure.
I was not bullied by other people on the internet. I did not have to compare myself to the lives of people on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever you're using. But so this group, millennial, that's what it's normal to them. Is everyone's lives is in front of your face. And so what that has done, created an apprehensive generation going, my life doesn't match their life. Oh no. And now they're afraid to fail.
Far more conscious of what's going on around you, which I would say every generation has had, but at a different level of awareness for sure.
So if you'll talk to people who are at universities, professors, administration, stuff like that, they're seeing on campuses now students who are afraid of failing because of the perceived lack of failure they're watching on social media. It's very interesting, I think.
Well, and that impacts the next generation you're going to talk about, I think, even more.
1996 to 2010 is Gen Z, Generation Z. Many received their first phone before they were 11 years old. I got my first phone when I was 23. How old were you?
18. I think literally my first semester of college, I was 18.
Okay.
Almost
and
19.
I was in college too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a little Nokia.
Yeah, the
I miss
indestructible
it.
phone.
Oh man, I loved that thing.
Well, so a Gen Z is characterized before they're even 11. They've got phones in their hands, meaning access to the entire world.
Yeah.
Highly aware of social justice and political issues because what they know is the information age. Activism is a value of Gen Z, meaning you don't just know the information. You need to be. They feel. I feel an urgency to be an activist about something, whether it be like my jeans were made in a fair trade environment. I'm an activist about that. Or where's my food coming from? This generation feels like they should be about some sort of a cause. Where previous generations were like, no, we just want to survive the war.
Yeah.
That's all we're trying to, or we just want to get food on the table.
Or I just want the best kind of jeans.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care where they come from.
I don't care where they come from.
I want them to look good.
No. Avid gamers and music goers.
Interesting.
I know. Yeah.
Music goers. What does that mean?
Like literally going to concert music.
Oh, okay.
This is I'm going to give you
experience.
This is the earbud group that all they've ever known is music is everywhere and all the time. And so why not go see what you've been hearing digitally? Go see it live. Desire life to be their own personalized experience. In other words, truth is individualistic, meaning my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. Which is dangerous because there is truth. What's true to you, if I don't like it, I can't then create a new truth. So anyways, this generation though is what's normal to them is being able to craft their truth.
Sure.
What they want to be true becomes true to them. And then that's why this generation is often, and many people believe, becoming disillusioned.
Sure.
And disenfranchised, wounded, but privately wounded because they lived their truth out and it didn't work.
Well, and I know there's a catchphrase that you do you, and the danger in that is when we're all doing our own thing, there's not a collective like togetherness.
Right.
We in pursuit of independence and what I want and what I need and what I think is best, we lose that collaboration of just being together. And
that's what we have to be careful about because, right now, I would imagine some people, especially, I'm a pastor. So and we help lead a church. And so stereotypically our audience or the people listening right now, a lot of them are connected to church. And so when I say, hey, they get to determine their own truth, I know a lot of you are going, oh my, that's horrible. But let's be quick to not judge, because they're being raised in a culture that's teaching them that they can make their own truth. They can define their own path, that no matter what anyone thinks about them, that they get to determine not only what they dress like, but who they identify as. And they're being told that. So rather than hate on that, I think it's important, that's why we're having this conversation, is that we've got to know that there are different generations, and rather than hate on them, it's important to know about them. The last one? The last one is 2011 to what they predict to be through 2025. Generation Alpha. We know very little, obviously, about Generation Alpha, because most of them are still living under the roof of their parents. Some of them have yet to be born. But it's a group of people that will know nothing other than digital world. The stuff that we bring up will be like so foreign, it'll blow their minds. So Generation Alpha, they'll be the first to have experienced some stuff, versus some of these other generations weren't necessarily always the first. It was a bit of a bleed over. So why I brought this up with the staff, and I think this is worth our listeners. So that's 7 generations who exist right now. In other words, that's 7 groups of people who see the world through their own lens,
but are living and working and driving around like all together,
all in the same
this
world.
Melting pot, right?
Literally, that tells you that same world, same bowl, 7 different perspectives of the bowl.
And on top of that, complexities and unique things within each one anyway. So it's a wild thing to think about. So one of the things that I think about a lot, and I was so convicted of it as you were sharing this information, was as a believer. So as somebody who's part of a church, but also just loves Jesus, what is that? What should this mean to me? What do I do with it?
Well, a logical conclusion is, because whatever generation you're born into and you're raised up in, you're not only going to see the world in a specific place, you're going to see the non-world. You're going to see what you don't see. In other words, the supernatural, the divine. You're going to see God with a certain lens. And so I think it's important for us to understand that the generation we were raised in is impacting how we see God, how we, maybe a better word is approach God, how we approach God. And so I thought it would be beneficial to make a list of how the different generations, and this bleeds over, so I'm not going to even categorize this with a specific generation, but that there are different approaches to God that we're taking that we think are in and of itself just fine by itself, which is dangerous. So religious heritage, growing up in a Christian home or attending a Christian school made me right with God, connected to God, just by being there, by being in a family. In our context, let's say you were born into a Catholic family, that makes you Catholic, that makes you connected to God. And that's some people's approach to God, is that, oh, you went to this school, you went to this church, you were born in this family, therefore you are connected to God. That's an approach based on generational stuff. Heritage reminds me of institution kind of stuff. If you're a member, you're a member.
You just make it easy. Why are you part of this? Well, because everybody else is.
Because everyone else is. Church involvement, regularly just attending church, just by just going. That was, and still is today, many people's approach to God, going, hey, so what do you think about God? Well, I go to church. A moral lifestyle, trying to be a good person, having integrity. Some people will take that singular approach, going, so what do you think about God? Well, I make good moral decisions. I'm a good person. And hopefully I'll be good enough for God and I to have a good conversation when I die. Intellectual knowledge. I believe, therefore I'm connected to God, meaning I believe in the existence of God. I believe that intelligent design made this world. So because I believe that, not necessarily my lifestyle matches it, but because I intellectually believe it and find it logical, then I'm connected to God, and that is good enough. Active ministry, where maybe you don't worship God in the sense of sit and just reflect with him, or sing to him or about him or speak to him. Your mode is to serve, is to not just be a good person, but to serve others. And by serving others, that is a way that you're connected to God or approaching God. A guilty conscience, welcome to me as a teenager, where if you feel guilty about decisions you've made, you interpret that as, well, I must still be connected to God in some way. And so I'm going to do what I don't feel guilty about. And when I feel guilty about it, I'm going to say, I'm sorry. And that's it. That's all it is about the roller coaster. Positive thinking. Just, I think good thoughts and God is good. So that's how I approach him. And then a past decision. That's a popular one where, let's say you were at an event, a worship service, a concert. Let's say you were just out in the hills and you had this moment with God that you're like, I don't know how to describe it. It was supernatural. It was awesome. And you made a decision in that moment. Like you could remember, many people have dates.
Yeah.
I remember such and such a date, this time, this is where I was. I was at camp.
We often write it. There's a space to write it in your Bible.
And you make the decision. However, many people, based on generational influence, that's all you did, though. Again, in our context, some people will get baptized and say, well, I was baptized. I made the decision to be baptized, or someone made the decision for me to be baptized. And so that decision has me right with God, and everything else doesn't really matter.
Even if it's a mile marker, like way, way back.
Yeah.
You just can keep pointing. See that way back there?
So what we often do now is what I'll use the term, this might be overly intense, but we'll demonize some of these. We'll make them negative. And let's pick on the last one, the decision. We'll say, well, following God is not just a one-time decision. So let's scrap ever inviting people to make a decision, which is foolish to scrap it.
Absolutely.
It's actually, it shows a little of our immaturity but it's our culture nowadays is to cancel everything when we see a little negative take on it, cancel it, cut it out. Where I would say a decision is powerful. Frankly, I remember the day that you and I decided, yes, we will get married. I remember the day that you and I said vows to each other. That's a decision. Now, is marriage only the moment where I proposed to you in a Volkswagen Passat?
Outside of the restaurant you
Right.
wanted to propose
Right.
inside of.
That's-
Sorry.
Is our marriage, is that all it was? Is our marriage
Right.
only the wedding day? No. But a decision is important, but that's not all that it is.
Right.
And so that's why bringing up the generational conversations is understanding that if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, oftentimes we actually end up being on the fence, judging the other generations, or maybe even lamenting about your own. You're going, I don't like my generation.
Yep.
Rather than trying to understand each other and understand that we might be approaching God in an unhealthy way, or I would say an inadequate way,
Yes.
an incomplete way. And that's why I think generational talk is so important nowadays. In fact, I don't think it's just like fun. I think it's crucial that we understand the existing generations right now, that there are 7 right now. I'll always tell people, I'll coach pastors and say, every church should have 3 generations represented at least in your church, or your church is dying.
I think, though, too, what it does is there's so much going on in everybody's lives. And I think everybody, but especially people who follow the way of Jesus, should be willing to, when somebody has a bad day or somebody is coming at a topic with a perspective that just feels really different or wrong to you, recognizing that doesn't necessarily make them bad. But I think we often do that. We go, oh, they're just terrible, or, oh, the hey boomer, which just grieves me because I think, no, they're coming at it from a perspective that maybe I'm not aware of. And so having this open posture of going, let me learn how you came to that, and let me share a little bit about where I came from. But this willingness to understand and to meet people where they are, and to be met where I am, I think is just so powerful, because Jesus is what transcends every generation. He's with all of us and sees all of us and was part of whatever it was that made that generation. Because you're right, not every person from that generation is exactly the same.
No.
But the reason why we have them is because the majority of people reflect certain things. And so as a follower of Christ, it just makes me so conscious of the need to meet people where they are and not just jump to, you're just never going to get it.
So I think one of the most mature things an individual can do is to realize that they aren't the only person that exists on planet Earth.
Oh, do you know, that reminds me because we were just in airports. And airports always remind me, like, there are other people here.
Yeah, it's crazy how
Get
people...
out of the way.
Yeah, no. Yeah, especially when you're in crowds, you're like, you're totally unaware of any other individual. No, I get it. It's funny, too, because I'm typically the taller or bigger guy. And, and I'm amazed at how often I need to move. I'm like, if I didn't move, you would have, like, hit my chest and fallen to the ground. And so let me give some pastoral guidance here. You're not really asking this, but I would recommend that we all spend time with someone in other generations who fits into those categories. That'll take some work. If you're parenting, you're gifted with some of those generations right there. And I regularly love having conversations with our kids. What's cool, what's not cool, what's important, what's not important. But go outside.
And why?
Yeah. But even just like learning, whether it's healthy or not. But here's some questions that don't change. They don't change by generation.
Okay.
It's still, sorry. It's still, you just got to go after this. Are you trusting in Jesus as the Son of God and Savior of your sin? No matter what any generation ever says about that, it doesn't matter, because you still need to know that you and we need a Savior. Yeah. That a life devoted to Jesus is a big deal. Yeah. Are you obeying Jesus as the Lord of your life? If you've never studied the word Lord, like not just boss, but someone who governs your life, like Jesus's ways or the highway, as we would say.
Yeah.
Crucial question to ask of any generation. Yeah. Like, are you, I know what's cool now and what's seems relevant or trendy or whatever, but is the way you're living life the way of Jesus? Are you showing the love of God to other people? I don't care what generation you're from.
Yeah.
Are you showing the love of God to other people? That is not generational. And then are you experiencing God's love for you? Like, are you actually, could you talk about like your time with God? Experiencing things in life. Not that it's like, it's amazing. Maybe it's low, but are you experiencing the presence of God? Those are I think important questions to ask, no matter what generation.
Those are so good. And I do think connecting with others, and we've had the privilege of having grandparents who were part of the greatest generation, and walking through. I had a grandpa that was in the war in a POW. You had a grandpa in the war. Yeah. Grandmas that went through depression, like the Great Depression, and being able to navigate what they walked through, and so why they carry some of the traits they do was so powerful for us, even as we started preparing for our family and what we wanted to matter in our family. So
some of the conversations I've really cherished when I get to sit down with my grandparents, which I don't get to do as often anymore, but almost every time I get that chance, I'll sit down and say, hey, how does today compare to when you grew up? Because what it does is it gives me insight that maybe I've got blind spots.
Yeah.
And I've got to have people from other generations in my life helping me be aware of that. Maybe what are some of the toxicities of my current generation that I am owning as good and right and a good response when they're going, no. This is not a good way of thinking. So
that's awesome. Thank you that was a lot of work that you and study that you've been putting into it, but it's so powerful if we really lean into it and see what the Lord has for us to learn from it. So thank you.
Anything for you, sweetie.
Country music in the car?
Nope,
Thank you.
Absolutely not. That's where I draw the line. Actually, no, I do. I don't turn the channel from.
No,
country.
Until there's a string of a few just really depressing songs, and then you make me turn it off. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, though. That was awesome. Yeah. That's been helpful.
Well, thanks for tuning into this. Hopefully this generation talk will spark you into a conversation with someone who's not in your generation.
Oh, yeah.
If you have questions, thoughts, anything about you want to comment, you can text us 605-250-1224. Until next time, know that we love you very much.
Bye, friends.